What up, Facebook Live family and friends? Elliot Andre, the head therapist, is here again with another interview with a therapist named Art. What's up, Art?
What's going on?
I'm chilling, man. So glad you're here.
Yeah.
I forgot to say that I'm from Connected Roots, but who cares? Anyways, that's where I'm from. Cool beans. Art, if you could, go ahead and give the viewers out there a brief description of who you are, what you do, and what separates you from the field.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. And I work with chronic illness and complex trauma. I have a business I founded, Integrative Wellbeing. And really, I would say I need to start with a little bit about myself, which is that 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease. And before that, I spent years and thousands of dollars trying to figure out what was going on with me. Probably about 10 years of searching for what was happening to finally find a doctor that really could figure it out and help me out. Mm-hmm. So learning from that, I really discovered that people kind of, when you get sick and you're sick for a really long time, you develop a bit of a disease mentality, which is really kind of becoming a victim of that sickness and the symptoms that you're having and everything going on. And that can be brain fog, that can be chronic fatigue, it can be unknown, unexplainable muscle pains, nerve pains, all kinds of stuff that people go through. Yeah. And it's a pain, and it really messes up people's lives, their relationships. It can interfere with work, can interfere with their life, their friends, their family. Because a lot of times when it's chronic, it's not very visible. So nobody really gets what's going on. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Damn, man. That's some heavy shit.
Yeah.
Like, that's like deal with that for so long and spend all that money. I think, I don't want to say thumbs up, I guess, if anybody's ever dealt with that before, because that sounds like a very traumatic, frustrating, and long journey to get where you finally are.
I would say it very much is trauma. Mm-hmm. I think chronic illness comes out of trauma. It's a piece of that resiliency where the more traumas people have in their life, the more susceptible they likely are to developing chronic illness at some point in time. Not necessarily, but if they get the right circumstances, then that can definitely happen. And then the illness itself is trauma. Getting diagnosed with it, having to deal with it, finding out that you can't do some of the things that you wanted to do in your life because you're sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you self-disclosing right off the bat. I think a lot of people can connect with where you're coming from and what that looks like, and I'm sure it's affected your practice as well and what you've wanted to do. So if you could, for our viewers out there, give us an idea of who the people you work with most, what modalities you use. I said off camera, you're telling me you do a lot of experiential work. Yeah. So if you kind of get into that and give examples, if you don't mind self-disclosing some of the information that you share with me, as well as some of the things that you've done with clients, I think a lot of our viewers out there would really enjoy that.
Yeah, definitely. What I'd say is I get a lot of people coming in who have been dealing with something for a long time that they don't really know exactly what it is. They don't necessarily have a treatment or a cure that they can do for that. Mm-hmm. So they end up in a place where they're just looking to figure out, like, what am I going to do with my life, and how am I going to find meaning and purpose in what I'm doing? And that can involve an individual. It can also involve a couple or the family, because a lot of times this doesn't just impact that person. It impacts their relationship with their spouse, with their partner, with their parents, relatives, people who don't get what's going on, that just want to say, like, well, just think positive, say your daily gratitude prayer and you'll feel better. And they just don't really get it.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Neither do I.
I don't like that, man. That's not cool.
But it's an invisible illness. And so I think people really run into that and they don't get the right support. And so they're coming looking for support, maybe sometimes looking for some of that work in the relational context of, like, how do I make this relationship work now that, as a point of self-disclosure, I remember that there was a point with my wife where I basically told her that I can't really have fun anymore. I'm just like so tired, so out of energy that I'm not fun. And she recognized that. And then how do we work with that to get back to a place of, like, maybe we can't have as much fun as we used to, but we can still have fun. And
it's adapted fun.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I use a lot of Gestalt work, and that's the experiential pieces, which is about relationship and about moving emotions. So it gets to a point of really like developing a different relationship with your Lyme disease, or with it could be any number of different diseases there. Chronic fatigue. I feel there's two categories of chronic illnesses, and one is what I would classify as the more terminal, which is something that is going to be like cancer or MS that somebody has, and that's going to have a major impact on their life and the length of time they're going to have to spend in that life.
In the family system, of course.
Yeah. And then there's kind of the other category, which is like chronic Lyme, chronic fatigue, IBS, things like that, that people get that it's going to impact their life for a long time, but it's not necessarily terminal. It's not going to lead to like an earlier death.
Sure.
So in both of those, it's learning how to work with, like, what is this in my life? What does it mean to me? And then working out that trauma piece of trying to separate out, like, what are traumas from my childhood or things that happened when I was younger that led to me being able to get sick because they led to a compromised immune system, compromised kind of limbic system for that fight or flight response that is maybe hyper alert or under alert. Yeah. And so that's bringing out that in session. We'll talk about what's your relationship to this? How does it impact your other relationships? What are the needs around it that you can't get met by yourself, that you need to be met by the environment, by medical professionals, by family, by friends? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, just thinking about the journey that you and others have gone on dealing with this, hidden disease, we'll say, seems so, I mean, the first thing that comes to me is just sadness and frustration. Like, to have to keep on going back and spending money and doing all these things. What's that look like, and where did you find like the aha moment that you felt like you could be better or feel better or start to do? Was it a therapist that you saw, if you don't mind disclosing, or was it a doctor that somebody kind of helped get you through that? What was the steps that you took?
I would say there hasn't been that aha moment, and that's part of that piece of where I think there's a big kind of disconnect for people who are going through this. The frustration in part is that there's a sense of eventually you'll get better, because everybody that's had a cold or the flu or pneumonia or something goes like, okay, yeah, but then like eventually you got back to being better, being engaged in life. Maybe you felt depressed for a little while and came back into life, but it's like, no, what if you just had that depression or that chronic fatigue or brain fog or memory issues for the rest of your life, and you're not sure if you'll ever get better? And for me, it's come in moments where I have improved my health, and I think that's definitely possible. Part of it has been my own personal work, my own journey of like figuring out my own emotions, the issues that maybe came up for me in my childhood with my parents, with other social situations that I had to work out. And then another part has been in finding the right medical professionals. And I think that's another really frustrating component.
It's got to be the hardest part, man.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I went through so many people. Some people gave up on me because they didn't know what to do. Some people continued to work with me and push to say like, oh, I can fix you. I can cure you. I can make this better. And that didn't work either. And I mean, I finally found somebody, Nancy Brown in Louisville,
awesome,
who really understands Lyme disease. And after I described my symptoms, she kind of went, that makes sense. Let's do a couple tests. They were expensive, but worth it, because then she started treating me with the right treatments.
When you needed, what you wanted, what felt good.
Yeah. And it made a difference. Like, I have more energy. I'm more able to be out in the world. But there's still this like lingering feeling of, what did the world used to be like for me? I know I used to have more energy. I used to be more engaged and fun and outdoorsy, and so many things I used to do that have had to change. That I feel, yeah, when you have a chronic illness, you have to learn how to cope with that. You have to learn how to integrate that into your life.
Sure.
Yeah.
What has coping been like or felt like for you? Because I think, coming from my own experience of dealing with a father who has ALS, and chronic, right, also life-threatening, and a timeline in that regard, it's been really hard for me to kind of get and figure out like how to radically accept that. Going back to some of the CBT skills that we've talked about on the interviewing show before, is like radical acceptance is a big thing. And I don't know what that's been like for you. I know it's been hard for me in a sense of dealing with a loved one. I feel like a lot of people out there watching right now, I think could definitely, and again, it might not be radical acceptance that you take as a skill in terms of like where you're at.
Yeah.
It just seems like you've been able to understand where you're at and cope and be okay with it. And I'm sure there's probably more layers of the onion we need to peel back in that regard. Don't want to spend all our time getting into that with you right now because we're not in therapy yet. It still affects me as well, and just hearing it, listening to it, because I can relate completely.
Yeah. I hear that. And what I would say is there is a component of acceptance, which is accepting that I have this disease, these issues that come up, but not accepting that that disease is going to define my life and who I am. Because I think, at least for me, I'm constantly fighting that. And I don't want to give up, because I feel like if I do, there have been times where I've been less energetic, less in the world, just because I'm like, you know what, I don't have the energy to do it. I'm going to lay in bed and I'm going to stay there. And so there's accepting what's going on. But I think from a bigger perspective, there's learning how to work with what the symptoms really are. It's not even coping, but it's getting used to the fact that, like, oh, okay, like, this is something that comes up because of my Lyme disease that I can deal with in my life and still do the things that I really need to do.
What does that look like?
So an example for me is, I remember, this has shifted over the past couple of years, but like 2-3 years ago, there would be these times of intense panic that I knew weren't related to anything really going on around me, but I would just suddenly get intense panic. My heart would be racing and I would not know what to do with that. And it was learning that, like, this is a part of my disease. This is a part of my experience in life and what's coming up for me, and learning that I can handle this. It's not going to, like, the world's okay, right?
Yeah, c'est la vie, world, yeah!
And that I'm going to be able to deal with that in the moment. And then do whatever I need to. And that might mean, like, okay, well, I got to, like, take a break from work, or I got to do some of these other things. But it was more learning, like, yes, this is okay, because this is a part of the disease and it sucks and I'm not happy to deal with it, but it's not the end of the world and I can continue to move forward.
Sounds like there's a lot of self-judgment in one way in the beginning of how you were feeling. And now it seems like there's a change in sense in the last couple of years of self-compassion.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I get that. I think a lot of people out there, viewers included, have been in that space where, you want to just fix. And we need to think about how we can tweak, and then cope.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard, man. Like when you're stuck with something that, you don't want to define you, yet it's such a big part of your life. I was talking to a client today, actually, who has chronic depression. And he's like, all these demons are in there with me, and all these are a part of me. And he's like, yeah, and then I get into these modes and I just can't get out of them. I'm like, you can get out of them, right? It's just how we get out of them.
Yeah.
He's the most creative human in the world. One of the most creative people I know. Art, spray paint, music. And these are things that he, like, forgets about when he's feeling this way. And I said, I'm going to hold you accountable, man. And I was like, you need to go home and you need to go paint. You need to write. You need to do something that you can express. I said, how many artists in the world are the most fucked up people? Like, straight up. I was like, right. I mean, every time I think of, like, Vincent Van Gogh, I'm like, yeah, the dude, like, shot himself and cut his ear. Like, that dude's fucked up, and depressed and all these things.
Yeah.
Yet he, to a extent, created some of the most beautiful, most iconic things out there.
Yeah.
And that was his way of expressing himself. So I get that. Like, I even talk to my dad about that sometimes. I'm like, my dad is a stellar athlete, and always has been, always will be. And, like, that's one thing he will not give up. So when he's down, I've noticed this. He's just been like, I'm going to go play tennis for 2 hours. It might not be the same tennis that I played when I was not diagnosed with ALS yet. I'm still going to do something that's
cool.
Is just going to whoop my ass and feel great about it after doing it, and then reap the benefits of, like, how I feel. like emotionally more so than physically, because physically after he pays 2 hours, I can imagine, I've never done it with him, but he's just like zonked. But in that regard, it's like taking that, right? And I hear that in your story of like, I'm just gonna live it and just enjoy it and do it,
I actually think that that's a major piece that needs to shift in our medical system, is that we define wellness now as not being sick, not having any kind of problem. And
that's fucked up, man.
Then
it kills me.
That's a part of where the name of my business comes from. Well-being for me is not just not being sick. It's like, we are going to be sick, but it's still feeling okay, and being able to deal with that and feeling like, oh yeah, I am sick, and this is a part of life, and this is something that we work with. And it's not necessarily loving it or accepting that sickness is like, yes, but
yeah, for sickness.
Yeah, right. But it's learning that, like, yeah, this is a part of being whole, being healthy, is being sick sometimes. And it's working with that. And that's totally okay. And I feel like if our system can move more towards that, there can be a lot more acceptance of people with mental health issues, people with physical and chronic illnesses, that we can start making a shift in really how we view and treat people.
Yeah.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
I mean, I think in part of what we're all saying right now is that there has to be a space of destigmatizing it first.
Yeah.
And then moving towards how we continuously talk about it, educate ourselves, and bring awareness to what somebody, you or I, living with sickness, living with illness can actually like be a big part of society. Like, I think a lot of people put this effort towards, if you're sick, then you can't be an upstanding person in society.
Yeah.
Which is such bullshit, because so many people out there, like we've stated, have these illnesses or have chronic pain but yet are like some of the most powerful, cool, inspirational people.
Yeah. There's so many historical figures too who have been incredibly wise. Jiddu Krishnamurti is an example of somebody. He was just an Indian teacher who there's a lot of background to him, but he had chronic ailments that actually became a part of where he got some of his deep insights into what he shared with the world. And I feel that he's just one example, and there's so many other people. And we have such a stigmatized view, as you're saying, of like, oh, well, you're sick, so that means you got to stay at home, you got to deal with whatever your sickness is, and don't bring it out into the rest of society. But it's like, what if that can be a great place for us to learn about ourselves, to become even more involved in the world, and really just feel like, oh yeah, I'm okay for being sick. And that's a part of my experience that I can really share with the world and help make the world a better place.
I agree 100%. I coming from personal experience, some of the saddest times that I've had in my life have been the most reflective, most aha, most oh my God kind of moments in my life. Even like starting this business. Yeah. Lauren and I were together, and we were going through a little bit rougher patch in our relationship. And we're like, let's be creative. Let's think. Like, we're both kind of like, where are we? What are we doing? And we had this aha moment. Like, let's do a business and let's do it together.
Yeah.
And it was crazy, man, because like a week before we were like, I hate you, not like to that extreme, but like almost to the point of like, I don't want to be around you. I don't want anything to do with you. And then we come up with this idea, and we're sitting there at lunch, sad, crying to ourselves, like, oh my God, we can start a business. This is so cool.
That is cool.
So and for me, like I embrace it. I lean into that shit hard, man. Like if I'm having a down day, I'm going to journal. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to see what that looks like and go from there, for sure. I want to talk about Gestalt a little bit more, because I don't think a lot of our viewers out there know what that is.
Yeah.
So if you could give us a brief, like you said, intro to that, or how that looks like in session, maybe.
Yeah.
I think that'd be helpful for our viewers, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah. So Gestalt, I know a lot of people think of Gestalt and they think of the empty chair.
Right.
And that is one component, but it's not all of Gestalt. I would say really at the essence, Gestalt is about being truly connected, genuinely in relationship, and being able to meet your needs in relationship for yourself and through your environment.
Okay.
And how that looks in a session could be working with a client, doing parts work, bringing out parts of themselves, putting it out in pillows or objects in the room so that they can start to have a conversation, integrate those parts of themselves into what's going on, or start to see that mental landscape and start to bring it into, we'll do a lot of body work, which is
The somatic
not just
part
talking.
of what you discussed.
Exactly. Yeah, not just talking, but getting up, moving, doing stuff, trying to figure out what am I getting from my body that's really needing to be seen, heard, felt, met in relationship. And that contact, I think, is so essential for everyone. And it's something that we lack a lot in society, because a lot of times we're on our devices, we're with people, but is that real emotional, essential aspect of who we are coming up in that relationship and being met by another person who's experiencing themselves fully in the relationship? And when you can get there, I feel like there's incredible healing moments that come out of that.
Yeah,
and it takes a lot of trust.
Yeah, a lot of trust. I think, like you said, in the sense of trauma.
Yeah.
That's I think it's a big part of a lot of people that I see in just owning their trauma.
Yeah.
And I've used parts work in some cases. I do it a little bit differently in the sense of more of an experiential, like let's go outside and like take, like a rock and say this is a part of us.
Yeah.
Right. And then taking that and throwing that away, and not letting that be so powerful in our lives yet.
Yeah, we can do that too.
Right. But it's cool to think about how parts show up and how so many people are kind of unaware of what that looks like, or like what traumas have held with them in certain aspects of their lives at ages and things like that. And you brought that up too. Yeah. In the sense of what you've been dealing with, or what your illness has like showed up as, I guess. Yeah.
And with the connection to complex trauma and relationship, there's almost always like developmental components to this. Places that people got stopped along the way, didn't get what they needed in the moment. And that part of them might need a little healing, so that then working with a chronic illness or a real traumatic experience, they have more of that just self-support to be able to deal with it, or to be able to find the person that can help them work with it.
Let's talk about self-support, because I think so many of us out there generally have a hard time self-soothing, self-supporting, anything in a lot of ways. Honestly, man.
Self-care is a big word too.
Right, self-care, thank you. And how often we find ourselves pushing that aspects of ourselves aside. Like we don't think it's essential, we don't think it's part of our life, we don't need it, right? So how, I don't want to put it on a scale or spectrum, but in the sense of doing this work, how much of that is self, brought on, right? Like you said, self-care, all the other selves you just mentioned, right? Like, so how can we kind of materialize that for the viewers out there? Like what that could feel like in session if somebody's like, no, I don't care about myself enough to like put the effort forward.
Then I think that comes into a question of like, if you're not caring about yourself, what part are you not caring about?
Yes.
And then how do you start to care about that? And who is it that's caring about that? Because that's a part of that person too. And so that's where the self-support comes in, is that, I think of my relationship with my wife, and I'm not going to get all of my needs met in that relationship. When I say that, like, I'm not fun anymore, it's like, I'm not going to be able to get her to make me feel fun. But is there a way that I can start to support myself enough to really kind of work with whatever that is to push that boundary of having fun? Getting out there and doing something, and then connecting with her in our fun, kind of. And I see this with my son too, which is that, my son brings out the fun in me, even when I'm exhausted. Sure. I just like, he brings out the fun, and I just want to play with him. So beautiful. And I let that go, and it's like there is something that's really healing in that, and really healing to know that it's not that I have to be fun for my son, or my son has to bring out the fun in me, but that I can bring that out in myself. Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely. I love that. That is such a beautiful way to end that, honestly. One reason to have children, right? They bring that out of you.
Oh, they do. I'm not doing it, but they bring out a lot of other stuff in you too. So.
Hell yeah, man. Perfect. All right. Before we wrap up, Art, please tell us any resources you may have, ways people can get a hold of you, and then we'll call it a day.
Yeah, you can look at my website, integrativewellbeingboulder.com. You can give me a call at 720-514-9506, and you can also email me at artginley@gmail.com.
Awesome. Art, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your calm, cool energy about talking about this stuff. I think we had a lot of great viewership already, man. Super stoked. Head Therapist is out. Peace up, people. Catch you later.
Thank you.
Yeah.